Hello students, this lecture is about smooth muscle contraction and how smooth muscle contracts. Smooth muscle contracts differently than skeletal muscle, and we're going to look at the molecular mechanism for that. First of all, we don't have a troponin tropomyosin complex. Instead, we're going to end up using a protein called calmodulin. And now calcium will still be the signal, but calcium will be interacting with calmodulin to create smooth muscle contraction. The myofilaments. Remember skeletal muscle, there were thick and thin filaments, and they were arranged in a longitudinal, lengthwise manner. Well, in this case, the myofilament of the smooth muscle, we still have thick and thin filaments. We still have actin and myosin interacting with each other and pulling on each other to cause contraction. But in this case, those myofilaments are arranged in a spiral manner. And so the smooth muscle will contract almost a kind of a corkscrew, or kind of like wringing a rag. And so let's take a closer look at that. Here we have the smooth muscle, and notice that where we will have the myosin and actin, the thick and thin filaments, they will be spirally arranged within the cell, but they will be ultimately be attached to intermediate filaments that are then attached with these dense bodies to various parts of the smooth muscle fiber, so that when we get contraction, we have this kind of squeezing effect. And so rather than just kind of, with skeletal muscle, we just have kind of a sliding effect and muscle shortens. In this case, with smooth muscle, the muscle, rather than shortening, it kind of squeezes. Now, the contraction of smooth muscle, first of all, it's not fast like skeletal muscle. It tends to be a slow contraction. It's synchronized. The smooth muscles, the smooth muscle cells, they all interact as a single unit because they're electrically coupled. They have gap junctions that allows the flow of calcium between them, so that they all contract as a single unit. Oftentimes, these smooth muscle cells, are self-excitatory, and again, smooth muscle is not under conscious control. It's an involuntary action, and so some of the smooth muscle cells will be self-excitatory to create contraction, and then often the rate and intensity of the contraction is modified by the autonomic nervous system or other chemical stimuli. So in the contraction of smooth muscle, we are still using the sliding filament mechanism. Ultimately, myosin will be pulling on actin to cause a contraction, and the trigger is still calcium, and calcium being released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. But what will happen is calcium will bind to a molecule called calmodulin, and calmodulin will activate an enzyme called the myosin light chain kinase, and that will activate myosin to then bind to actin and pull on actin to cause contraction. So if we take a look at it, here's the overview where we will be using calcium. Calcium will come in from both the exterior sources and the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It'll activate calmodulin. Calmodulin will activate a myosin light chain kinase. The myosin light chain kinase will then, along with ATP, will then activate and charge the myosin molecule, and then finally the myosin molecule will pull on the actin molecule to cause contraction. Let's just take a look at that step by step. So here in the first step, just like the skeletal muscle, calcium is going to be the trigger. Calcium is going to control contraction. In this case, for the smooth muscle, calcium comes from both exterior sources as well as the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Calcium then comes in, and calcium will activate a protein called calmodulin. And when calmodulin is activated, it will then activate a protein called myosin light chain kinase. So we have a protein cascade here. We have an enzymatic cascade ultimately involved in smooth muscle contraction. And the myosin light chain kinase, it will then activate the myosin molecule. ATP will charge the myosin molecule, giving it the energy to be able to bind and pull on actin. And then the myosin heads will then bind to actin, pull on the actin, and ultimately cause contraction of the smooth muscle cell. And remember, that contraction at a macroscopic level, the cellular level, looks like actually somebody is kind of squeezing. It's a kind of a squeezing effect. And so that, again, here's the overview of that. Calmodulin activating kinase, activating myosin, and then getting contraction. And then finally, notice that this is very energy efficient. It uses uses a kind of a slow ATPase molecules to charge myosin. Also, very differently from the skeletal muscle, in this case, the myofilaments, the myosin may bind to actin and hold. Remember, in skeletal muscle, myosin was constantly binding to actin, pulling and releasing. So there was this kind of cross-bridge cycling effect between myosin and actin. In the smooth muscle, myosin may bind to actin and just hold in place there. And that allows for prolonged contractions. That's the kind of contraction you have to have when you're moving food through the gastrointestinal tract, or you're having to constrict your bronchial tubes in the lungs. And then finally, relaxation. For relaxation to occur, calcium detaches from calmodulin. Calcium moves back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum out of the cell, and the myosin then returns to its relaxed state, and the smooth muscle relaxes. Thank you.